What is HIPAA? HIPAA is Health Information Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. As we go through this lesson, you will acquire the knowledge of the HIPAA Privacy Rule and its relation to the ASN health professional role. After completing this lesson, you will be able to discuss the general concepts of HIPAA guidelines, adapt HIPAA guidelines for the various settings in which you might practice throughout the curriculum, discuss the patient-client rights regarding his or her health information, differentiate individuals who have a need to know for those who don't, discuss application of HIPAA to the student role, list legal, professional, and academic consequences of violating HIPAA rules. What part do students play in HIPAA privacy rule? How does this law affect you in the student role? Well, the OTC Associate of Science and Nursing program is committed to protecting the privacy and the integrity of the health information of the patients that you will encounter during your clinical rotations. The HIPAA privacy rule recognizes the importance and value of this commitment. The privacy rule applies to health plans, healthcare organizations, and to any healthcare provider who transmits health information in electronic form or written form. This includes you, the student. So why is there a privacy rule? There are some documented cases that led to the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. A few of these are, for an example, an Atlanta truck driver lost his job in the early 1998 after his employer learned from his insurance company that he had sought treatment for a drinking problem. Then there is the late tennis star Arthur Ashe's positive HIV status was disclosed by a healthcare worker and published by a newspaper without his permission. Another case was Tammy Wynette's medical records were sold to the National Enquirer by a hospital employee for over $2,000. These are just a few cases that have been documented. There are many more cases that have been documented that actually led to the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the HIPAA privacy rule provides federal protections for individually identifiable health information held by covered entities and their business associates and gives patients an array of rights with respect to that information. At the same time, the privacy rule is balanced so that it permits the disclosure of health information needed for patient care and other important purposes. So what is HIPAA protecting? The privacy rule protects all individually identifiable health information held or transmitted by a covered entity or its business associate in any form or media, whether electronic, paper, or oral. The privacy rule calls this information protected health information, also known as PHI. The privacy rule gives patients more control over their protected health information. So you need to know patients' rights regarding the use of their PHI, key terms and general rules that you can apply, and when you can share patient information and when there are limits to what can be used or shared. The privacy rule gives patients the right to have their PHI protected, be able to inspect and copy their records, request that their PHI and their records be corrected or changed, ask for limits on how their PHI is used or shared, ask that they be contacted in a specific way, such as at work and at home, and get a list of disclosures made of their PHI. So what is identifiable health information? Well, there is demographic data that relates to the individual's past, present, or future physical or mental health or condition. the provision of health care to the individual, past, present, or future payment for the provision of health care to the individual. And then there's that identifies the individual for which there is a reasonable basis to believe can be used to identify the individual, such as a room number, initials of their name. And then you have individually identifiable health information, which includes many common identifiers: their name, their address, their birth date, social security number, patient record number. There are many examples out there. Protected health information can include names, addresses including zip codes, all the dates that they were seen, telephone and fax numbers, email addresses, social security numbers, medical record numbers. PHI can also include health plan numbers, license numbers, vehicle identification numbers, account numbers, biometric identifiers, full face photos, any other unique identifying number, and characteristic or code. PHI includes information sent or stored in any form that identifies the patient or can be used to identify the patient, that is created or received by a covered entity. That generally is about a patient's past, present, and or future treatment and or payment of services. When written permission for PHI is needed, is to use or share PHI for certain marketing and fundraising activities. Psychotherapy notes are certain notes about a counseling session that are separate from the rest of the patient's medical record to use or share PHI for research. There are many myths about when patient permission is needed. Written permission is not needed to use or share PHI to treat a patient, get paid for treatment, or to evaluate the person who provided treatment, also known as TPO, to share PHI with that patient for public health purposes, such as to report births and or deaths, and then for disclosure to our vendors for TPO under a written contract. Written permission is also not needed to report PHI about a medical malpractice claim to an insurance carrier, to students in health education program as required by law, such as reporting abuse or neglect, for law enforcement, for organ donations organizations, to medical examiners and funeral directors, and to avoid threats to health and safety. Patients can decide if they want some or all of their PHI to be used or shared, such as for patient directories to friends and family members involved in patient care or payment. Generally, the amount of PHI used, shared, assessed, or requested must be limited to only what is needed. For example, when a billing company bills for blood tests, it does not need the patient's complete medical record. Workers should have only such PHI as their job responsibilities require. For an example, someone who delivers food trays to the patient may need PHI about the patient's diet, but does not need to know why the patient is in the hospital. Take steps or reasonable safeguards to secure and protect PHI. For an example, speak in soft tones when discussing PHI. Do not discuss PHI in public hallways or in elevators. Use, but do not share, computer passwords and lock cabinets that store PHI. How do students assure patients' rights to privacy and confidentiality? PHI should be shared with as few individuals as needed to ensure patient care, and then only to the extent demanded by the individual's role. For an example, the nursing assistant needs to know only the facts concerning the patient's current admission. As a nursing student, you will discuss PHI only as it applies to your education on your patient's care. Take all reasonable steps to make sure that individuals without the need to know do not overhear conversations about PHI. Do not conduct discussions about PHI in elevators, cafeterias, hallways, or other public areas. Do not let others see your computer screen while you are working, and be sure to log out when done with any computer file. When preparing care plans or other course-required documents, take extra care to identify the patient or client by initials only. Use other demographic data only to the extent necessary to identify the patient and his or her needs to the instructor. Protect the computer screen, PDA, clipboard, or notes from other individuals who don't have a need to know. Protect your printer output from others who don't have a need to know. Protect your floppy, zip drive, CD-ROM, PDA from loss and/or theft. In the student role, you are not to photo duplicate or fax patient documents in the process of working with your patient's PHI. As an employee of an agency, you must use the agency's security procedures to transmit PHI. And last but not least, do not put notes with PHI in the trash or paper recycle cans. Okay, we are going to discuss some frequent questions that are asked regarding the HIPAA privacy rule. Question number 1. Is PHI the same as the medical record? No. HIPAA protects more than the official medical record. A great deal of other information is also considered PHI, such as billing and demographic data. Even the information that a person is a patient in the facility is a protected health information. Next question. What if I'm accidentally overheard discussing a patient's PHI record? It is not a violation as long as you were taking reasonable precautions and were discussing the protected health information for a legitimate purpose. The HIPAA privacy rule is not meant to prevent care providers from communicating with each other and their patient during the course of treatment. These incidental disclosures are allowed under HIPAA. Another question. If I overhear patient care information in the elevator or in the hallway, how should I handle it? If it seems appropriate, remind the speakers of the policy and privacy. Next question. I am a nursing student in the hospital and don't need to access PHI. But every now and then a patient's family member asks me about a patient. What should I do? Well, you should explain to that family member that you do not have access to that information and refer the individual to the patient's healthcare provider. Okay, let's follow up with one more frequently asked question. When I am speaking to a patient and friends or family members are in the treatment room, do I assume the patient has given me permission to speak at the PHI in front of these persons, or do I need to ask them to leave? It is proper to speak unless the patient objects. If you are uncertain, you can ask the patient if it is okay to discuss their PHI in front of the people present. Okay, so let's discuss HIPAA compliance. In addition to federal laws, failure to comply with HIPAA also violates Nursing Code of Ethics, the Missouri State Board of Nursing Standards of Practice, and OTC's ASN program academic and scholarly policies. And the consequences that will result in HIPAA violation are legal consequences, civil or criminal penalties, fines plus imprisonment, and the academic consequences will be reprimands, loss of points towards grade, or failure of the course, and or dismissal from the School of Nursing. This concludes this lesson. If you have any questions related to the content of this lesson, please contact the instructor.